Hi, everyone. Before we get to this week's episode, I wanted to take a moment to talk directly to you. In today's episode, I answer questions from a high school teen who, like so many other kids, has a lot of questions about what's going on in our country. We recorded this conversation, the first of its kind for At Our Table, just a day before the headlines broke about a deal to end the shutdown. And I'll be honest, I'm still in shock. After so many Democratic victories on Election Day, I can't believe that a handful of Democratic leaders agreed to a deal that rewards the same extremists who caused this mess in the first place. Because let's be clear, Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans wanted this shutdown. They wanted chaos. They wanted pain. They wanted to hold working families hostage just to prove a political point. And people suffered because of it. Federal workers went weeks without pay. SNAP benefits were frozen. Airports were in disarray. Families were stretched to the breaking point. So I understand that ending the shutdown brought real relief, and I'm grateful for that. But I also know this. Giving in to MAGA threats doesn't make them stop. It only tells them go right ahead, threaten the American people again, because eventually they'll cave. For me, protecting healthcare, protecting people, that was well worth the fight. Because I know what happens when folks don't have access to care. In this episode, you will hear me share a story about my grandfather. And despite his years of hard work, he never had the healthcare he deserved. And later in his life, he suffered because of it. And here's the truth, my friends. This deal didn't fix anything. It just pushed the problem down the road. The government's only funded through January, which means we could be right back here again facing another MAGA manufactured crisis. So rather than scrap this episode, I decided to release it because we talk about the shutdown, what it means for all of us, and how we got to this point. Shutdowns used to be rare. Now they've become a political weapon, a tool for extremists who care more about power than they do people. So while I'm relieved that this one is over, I know that the fight isn't. The only way to stop these games is to hold the people playing them accountable and to do it at the ballot box. All right, enough of my preaching. Let's get to the conversation. Hi, everyone. I'm Jaime Harrison, and I'm the host of At Our Table. But today we're sitting down at a different table. I've loved all of our table conversations this season, but we all know that some of the most memorable and surprising conversations often happen at the kids' table. And maybe we as adults really need to think about how our kids are viewing and experiencing our government and politics and the questions that they may have. So today, I'm so thrilled to pass it over to one of my favorite teens, someone I've known for most of her life. It's Margo, folks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Margo, and today I'll be the host of At Our Table, and Jaime will answer the questions. So one thing I've been thinking about a lot is the government shutdown. What is a government shutdown?
That's a good question. So what is a government shutdown? Well, I think the best way to describe that is to really describe the process for funding our government. Anything that happens with money, it starts in Congress. And they have this budget process, which they start off and they come up with the budget parameters, which basically tells you how much money the government has to spend in that given year. There's money for education, there's money for transportation, there's money for defense, there's money for health and human services. In this bucket, you can only spend this amount. In this bucket, you can only spend this amount. In this bucket, you can only spend that. And then ultimately, the Senate and the House have to agree on what that is. And once they agree, they send it to the president. Now, that is how the system should work. There's a certain deadline that if they don't get agreement by, then that means all of the funding for the government then runs out. And that's where we are right now. Congress didn't get their bills done in time, didn't send it to the president in time because they couldn't get agreement between Republicans and Democrats. And so therefore, there was nothing to send to the president. And as a result of that, the government shuts down. That means that the federal government cannot spend any money to support its operations. And that's some of the basic things. You and your family travel all the time. So you see those TSA agents that are there. They are federal government employees. That means that when the government is shut down, those folks aren't getting paid. Now, some of them still have to report into work, but they are not getting a paycheck. Eventually, what happens is that people need paychecks in order to pay their rent, to pay their light bill, to put food on their table. And so some of those folks will, eventually decide to quit their jobs to find something that does pay so that they can pay their bills because the bills don't stop. Or they start taking time off. And when they start taking time off, that means it becomes more difficult. Now you don't have all of the people there that are necessary in order to get all those people to come into the airport and to get through security in a timely fashion. Well, just think about that across the board. Everything that is important that the federal government touches. You have various agencies, Department of Agriculture, which handles the nation's food, the Department of Energy that handles the nation's energy, the Department of Transportation that focuses on our roads and bridges and highways and the airports. All of those things, even some of our law enforcement officers, the FBI, the CIA, our military, the Department of Defense, all of those various things and those people who work at those departments are all paid by the federal government. And in the midst of a shutdown, none of those programs that those federal government employees and those departments run, and none of the people who work there are actually getting paid. And so, in essence, everything breaks apart. So just think about if your parents weren't able to get their paycheck, right? It means all of the things that the luxuries that you're able to do, going out with friends, having nice meals, many of those things start to disappear or slow down or maybe not happen at all. And that's really what's happening right now in our federal government.
So do these government shutdowns happen a lot?
Well, the frequency of our shutdowns have been increasing, and one of the things that it seems very consistent that when Donald Trump is president, we have the longest shutdowns that we ever have. He is a president that now has the records for the two longest shutdowns in the history of this nation, and it's even more odd when the shutdowns take place when it's one party that controls the White House, the House, and the Senate. Normally, you see shutdowns or some friction when you have a Democrat in the White House and Republicans control the House and the Senate, and there's disagreements in terms of funding priorities and policy priorities. But it's very odd to see one party to control all three entities, the House of Representatives, the United States Senate, and the White House, and to have a shutdown and then have that shutdown be the longest in the history of this nation. Ultimately, what you want is for Republicans and Democrats to sit down and put the American people first. But it seems like we have a president right now, Margo, regrettably, and this is not me being overly partisan, who doesn't want to negotiate, who doesn't want to sit down. I mean, even Joe Biden, and I saw this firsthand, negotiated with Republicans to avert a shutdown. There was a threat of a shutdown when he was president, but he sat down. He accepted some of the things that they wanted, even though he didn't agree with them. He understood that in order to get the votes that he needed in order to fund the government, he had to negotiate with the other side. And they had put their priorities on the table. He put his on the table, and they came to some agreement in order to keep the government funded.
So why do these shutdowns happen? Like, what causes them?
Well, it is those policy disagreements that I just mentioned. This shutdown has started it's because, one, I am going to be partisan here. Mike Johnson, who's the Speaker of the House, just doesn't know what he's doing and could not pass the appropriations bills that fund our government. And when you can't do those bills and then send them to the Senate, and then the Senate agrees to the bills and then send them over to the White House, then you have this type of dysfunction. And ultimately, in the Senate, in the House, you can pass a bill with a simple majority. But in the Senate, you need 60 votes because of the filibuster rule. You need 60 votes to pass any legislation to get it to move on so it eventually goes to the White House. Well, there aren't 60 Republicans in the Senate, and that means they need some Democratic support. I want you to imagine this, Margo, that you have friends coming over your house, and in order to get something, all of you have to be in agreement, or at least 6 out of 10 of you have to be in agreement. But 5 of you decide, "This is what we're gonna do." We're not gonna really talk to that 6th person or one of the other 4 people. This is what we wanna do. We're 5 out of the 10, and we wanna move forward on it. And we're not gonna ask their input, and then you try to move forward. Well, if the other folks don't wanna move forward on it, then you can't move on it, right? You can't agreement. If you didn't even, acknowledge them or give them the opportunity to give their input, then odds are you're probably not going to get their agreement to move forward with it. Well, that's basically what we have right now. You have, the 53 Republicans who are all in agreement that this is what we should do. They're in agreement with Donald Trump, but yet they still need 7 more Democrats to work with him. But they don't even acknowledge or respect the Democrats to bring them to the table to say, well, what are the things that you deem as priorities? What are the things that you want to address? And we're willing to address those things and do some of those things in order to get your support. And that's the sad part is that these folks are so focused. Donald Trump has them so focused on gridlock rather than trying to find some cooperation to move the country forward.
So why did our leaders let this government shutdown happen?
Well, Harry Truman used to have a sign, I think, on his desk that says the buck stops here, right? I mean, really, the president of the United States is our chief executive. And so you have to facilitate bringing the necessary parties to the table to really find common ground to move the country forward. You're the head of the nation. That's your responsibility. That's your job. If you wanted the top job, that's part of the responsibility. And it seems like Donald Trump just doesn't see that. And that's really sad. Again, shutdowns aren't unique to Donald Trump. I think the longevity of the shutdowns are because of the nature of who he is and not wanting to sit down and negotiate with folks that, he may fundamentally disagree with on a lot of things. But I mean, when you're in a legislative body like the House and the Senate, and you have a democracy or the republic that we have, you gotta negotiate and you gotta find compromise. And it's important to have someone who understands that. And regrettably, it just doesn't seem like our president does.
So are there no other options in the government system other than shutting the entire government down?
Well, I mean, listen, they could again, it's at this point, it's all about negotiating. They could decide and find some agreement on certain aspects of the government and create some kind of when they cobble some of these bills together, Margo, they call them something. It's this weird word called an omnibus, which is basically they're taking very small segments of the federal government in terms of the budget, like education and defense and healthcare, and they're pulling them together into one big bill, right? Instead of these separate bills. And sometimes when it's a really small one, like if they pull all of them together, they call it an omnibus. When it's only a few of them, they'll call it a minibus, right? So omni big, mini small. And so they could, maybe they can find some compromise and say, well, we want to fund ag because people need to get the SNAP benefits, food stamps. We want to fund defense because we need to make sure our soldiers and their families are taken care of. Let's find some common ground on that. And then the other things we'll wait as we try to negotiate. So there are a lot of various options that they can do. And there's still money out there, discretionary money that the president could tap into or move around in order to fund certain very dire aspects of the government. But ultimately, Margot, the president needs to call all of the folks into the room to sit down and negotiate. And, the sad thing is, this is something that is also unprecedented. This is the longest shutdown ever in American history. But I have never seen the House of Representatives be out of session as long as for 7 weeks, the House of Representatives has not voted. That's not counting the month off that they had in August. So, and these people are still getting paid, whereas the folks, the TSA agents aren't getting paid. The people who need SNAP benefits aren't getting their food stamps. The all of the other folks aren't getting, if your parents didn't do their work, they wouldn't get paid. If I didn't do my work, I wouldn't get paid. But yet Congress is still getting paid even though they aren't going to work. It's just showing the sheer dysfunction right now in our government.
What's different about this shutdown, though, from the one in 2018?
The difference, well, one, because it's going longer, it's having even greater impact on our economy. There's going to be billions of dollars that are lost out of the American economy as a result of it. Also, it is so close to the holidays, and I shudder to think about what this means for Thanksgiving, what this will mean for Christmas, the impact that it will have on the supply chain. And, prices are already sky high for a lot of folks. Goods and services are already really expensive. I'm sad to say things are only going to get more expensive as a result of this long shutdown because it's harder to get things to people. There's going to be a lack of supply because, the airlines aren't flying as many flights. That means UPS can't do the things that it needs to do. The shipping isn't going to take place like it normally does. And so it's going to be more difficult as, you know, families try to get Christmas gifts and all that, finding the various things. It's just going to be much more difficult. And it didn't have to be this way. And ultimately, it's the American people that are suffering as a result.
So, what's the point of the shutdown that is happening now?
Well, Margo, this is about healthcare. And this battle between Democrats and Republicans on healthcare started a long time ago. It started with when Barack Obama was president and he decided to pass a healthcare plan for America called the Affordable Care Act, or some people call it Obamacare. Well, the Affordable Care Act, if your job does not provide healthcare, it allows you to buy into a healthcare plan, even though your job isn't providing it for you, and to do so at a reduced rate. And so it makes it affordable for people to be able to pay for healthcare on a personal basis. And some of these plans are, 150, 200, $300 a month. Well, Democrats in these last few years under Joe Biden were able to help subsidize the cost of that healthcare. So instead of it, say people were paying $600 for healthcare, they're paying $300 or $200. Well, this is right now a battle on whether or not those subsidies can continue. Republicans are arguing that they should not continue. And therefore, that means then the healthcare costs for the average of American person who's in the ACA could increase by 100 or 200 or 300%. And Democrats are saying prices are too high right now for the American people. Donald Trump's tariffs are too high. They cannot afford for their healthcare premiums to also go up. Because if they do go up, many Americans will choose not to take healthcare at all. That could be, again, a choice of life versus death. And so that's really what this battle is all about.
Do you think the Democrats should just give in?
I don't think the Democrats need to give in on this because this is something that is fundamental. Healthcare is important. And if you can't afford your healthcare, I had a grandfather, Margo, who died because of complications he had with diabetes. Well, when he was working, there was no Affordable Care Act. Most people in this country get their health care through their jobs. Well, the job that he had, and he worked very hard, 40 plus hours a week, but his job didn't provide health care. And so, going to the doctor was very expensive. And so instead of going to the doctor when he had a nagging pain or something didn't feel right, he'd go and get some over counter drugs, a Tylenol, or Advil, or he used to take this thing called a goody powder. And, that was his health care. But as a result, he found out that he had diabetes way too late. And eventually, the impact diabetes had, he eventually had to have a leg amputated and toes off of his foot amputated. And that meant that he couldn't work. Right. And people are making choices like that if they don't have healthcare or if they can't afford healthcare. And so it's really, really important. This is not a battle where Democrats are trying to feed their own egos, like they are trying to thumb their nose at Donald Trump. People will make life and death decisions. People will make lifelong decisions based on whether or not they can afford their healthcare, whether or not they can afford those drugs that they need to take in order to sustain their lives. And so it's a really, really important thing. And so I'm heartened by Democrats standing up saying that this is worth fighting for. The American people deserve to have health care in this country. If Donald Trump did all that he could do in order to give 900 multi-millionaires and billionaires billions of dollars of tax cuts, then we should be able to work hard to make sure that 20 million Americans get to keep their health care.
Circling back to, people not being able to get goods and stuff, how is the government shutdown affecting people not being able to get food stamps? Because I've heard a lot about it, but I've never really understood it.
Yeah. So, there are a lot of low income folks in this country, a lot of people who are impoverished either because they don't have a job or the job that they have doesn't, they live in a place where, the rate of living is expensive. There are some folks who require additional assistance in order to just have the food that they need in order to take care of themselves or their families. And so the federal government has this program. When I was growing up, it was called food stamps. It's now called SNAP, which is the acronym for it. It's a nutritional program. And basically, every month, the federal government, in conjunction with and in coordination with the state government, issues these benefits, monetary benefits to folks so that they could go to the grocery store and actually buy food. So when the federal government shuts down, that is one of the programs that loses its funding. Now, there are some again, you remember I said there are contingency funds that are there that in these times in which the president can and the Department of Agriculture, which is the department that issues the SNAP benefits to the states, there's some contingency funds that they can tap into. The problem is Donald Trump has refused to utilize those funds. And so right now it's going back and forth in the courts and whether or not the courts and judges are going to make him utilize the funds in order to send those benefits to the states so that they can then get them to the people so they can buy food. And so it's really, really dire for a lot of families. I grew up in a low income family and grew up on food stamps. And so I know how important that is to so many people. Just the basic necessities that many of us take for granted, milk and eggs and peanut butter and bread, right? Just those bare necessities. Well, when you live in a low income family and you don't have a job or the job that you have just doesn't pay enough in order to pay all the things that you have to pay from childcare to the electricity bill to water to cable and all of these other things. You need those additional benefits. And so it's really, really hard for a lot of people right now. And they're very, very nervous families who are just thinking about how am I going to put food on the table for my kids. Government shutdowns are not good for anybody. And they're particularly very harsh for folks who have very limited means. And they impact everybody, regardless of, you could be the richest person in America, or you can be the poorest person, and it will have an impact. And this is not the way that many times you'll hear in American politics, folks say that the United States is the greatest country on the face of the planet. Well, this is not the model for for that type of greatness. We got to find ways to work with each other and to work together and to find priorities. And all of America suffers when the government shuts down.
So, I heard you say that people say America is the greatest country, and that reminded me, in school right now, we're learning about how the founding fathers wanted America to be a, like, example for other countries, and I was wondering, they say they want America to be equality for all men, but how come 250 years later that still isn't true?
Margo, that's one heck of a question. I think what the founders of America had was this grand idea, and it's something that I think we should continue to strive for. But it's not something that we've always achieved, right? But I think the thing that has made America so great is that we've constantly tried to get there, right? We've constantly tried to be better. We've constantly tried to achieve that equality of all, that the American dream is available for all of America's people. I mean, I know that's the thing that I strive for in my time working in politics. And I know that's something your parents believe in. And it is tough in a system like ours. You got a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds and experiences and motivations and philosophies. And so the question is, how can you get the vast majority of us to agree on a philosophy on how moving forward? How can you get the vast majority of us to agree on policies that help get us closer to that ideal that the founders talked about? And sometimes America's can be like a pendulum. It'll swing back and forth. And, sometimes we really lean in it. And then there are times in which we regress and we fall back. And so have we gotten there? No, we haven't gotten there. But do I think we still have the opportunity to get there? Yes. But is it going to be easy? No. It never has been. I mean, this experiment that America has been trying to do for 200 plus years is a unique one. I don't think any other country on the planet has ever done what we've been able to achieve and what we've been able to do. But we still have so far to go in terms of actually living up to those grand thoughts and ideals that the founders of this country started the nation on.
So, what do you think are the most important qualities a presidential candidate should have?
Mm, that's a really good question, Margo. I think it's qualities that a president should have, right? Because if you're going to vote for somebody as your nominee, then you're saying that they should be president of the United States. I think first and foremost, honesty. I think they need to be honest. I think they have to have a love for this country and all of the people in this country, not just a segment of the people in this country, but all of the people. Someone who believes that the American dream should be available for all of America's people, who actually believes in what the founders were trying to achieve and is going to work hard to strive for it. Somebody that is not afraid of hard work and effort. Someone who can really honestly and truly try to bring the nation together, even with folks that they disagree with. Find some common ground. Someone who understands that even that we need to make sure that folks have the opportunity to flourish in the nation. The least of these, you know, none of us can control what families we are born into or how much money we are born into. But what we can control is making sure that the opportunities in America are available to everybody. I think for me, those are the qualities that I want to see in a person that is president of the United States. That someone who understands the greatness of this country and that the greatness doesn't come from some politician, but it comes from the diversity of the people, the diverse peoples that we have that make this country up.
Before we end, I hear there's an award you guys give out?
Well, yes, Margo, we do give out an award every week. For the kids' table, we're going to call it the Sit Your Butt Down Award. Uh, do you have any people that Margo that you want to give this award to? In essence, it's given to someone who or to a group who you really think needs to get their stuff together. So, do you have a likely recipient for this week's Sit Your Butt Down Award?
I have someone in mind.
Who?
J.D. Vance. He thinks he's very, very important, but no one knows what he actually does.
Amen to that, Margo.
It's like
You
we
know
only
what?
see him on the news, but we don't know what he does.
No, we don't know what he does. I know he takes a lot of vacations, I hear.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, and there are other things, but they're not worth talking to about on this episode. But, Margo, I join with you in that. JD Vance, you are this week's recipient of the Kids Table Sit Your Butt Down Award.
You're welcome.
I love it. I love it. Well, Margo, thank you again for being our guest host. You're the first guest host at our table. So I am overjoyed to have you here. And I mean, you had some hard questions there. So you had me sweating there for a bit. But thank you again. I really enjoyed this. And I think everybody's going to enjoy this episode to hear what our young people are thinking about as it relates to this shutdown. So thank you again, Margo. and look forward to another episode down the road with you at our kids' table.
Thank you for answering my questions.
If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or anywhere you find your podcasts. To be the first to know who will be at our table next, find us at ourtablepodcast.com. At Our Table with Jaime Harrison is a production of Vision Blue Media. Our founding executive producers are Jason Hayter and Jaime Harrison. Our producers are Kyle Kelly and Emily Harrell. Our content consultants are Ernie Grigg and Clay Middleton. Our digital communications are led by Lauren Brown. Courtney Reamer of Sounds Great Strategies is our creative consultant. Neil Rossini of FWRV LLP provides production legal. Title sequence by Tom Hunt. Our theme song, Blonde Gone, is written by Dewey and published by Alibi Music Library. Thanks so much to Margo and her friends for coming up with all of the questions for today's episode.
And if you're under 18 like me and you want to host an episode of At the Kids Table on At Our Table, please reach out. Message the AOT team on any platform or email us at producer@aotpodcast.com.
I'm Jaime Harrison, and I look forward to another conversation at our table.